Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, September 3, 2024 Mound Planning Commission regular meeting. We'd like a roll call, please.
Commissioner Young.
Present.
Commissioner Archambault.
Present.
Commissioner Rosner.
Present.
Commissioner Savstrom.
Here.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Heel.
Here.
Commissioner Wacker.
Here.
Chair David Good.
Here.
Did I get you, Mr. Heel?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, we have no agenda amendments. You've received the agenda in your packet that was emailed by Sarah. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as distributed.
Motion to approve as distributed. Second.
We have a motion and a second. We have discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have before you electronically minutes of the August 2024 special/rescheduled meeting of the commission. Are there any changes to those minutes as distributed? Hearing none, chair would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as distributed.
Motion to approve minutes as distributed. Second.
We have a second. We have discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, moving down to Board of Adjustment and Appeals. We have planning case number 24-13. And the way we're going to handle this is there will be a presentation by staff. We will have discussion amongst the commission. Then we'll have applicant comments, if any. After that, we will open a public hearing and hear people from the public if there are any. Following that, we'll have further discussion by commission. And then we will consider action on staff recommendations on page 20 and page 22 of your agendas. Any questions on that? Hearing none, Ms. Rita.
All right, good evening, members of the commission, members of the public. I'm Rita Trapp, city's planning consultant. Just a reminder to everybody here that the role of the planning commission is as an advisory body to the city council. So their role is to hold the public hearing and solicit input from the community. Oh, I'm gonna just do this. Is that good enough?
A little more.
Well, then I think I'll do this. Good?
Better?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. And then to evaluate land use and subdivision requests based on the comprehensive plan, zoning and subdivision codes, and any requirements by state statute. So we just like to, when we have complicated procedures like today, we just like to have that ground rule of kind of what the role of the planning commission is. The request before you this evening is for a 12 unit or for sale condominium flats. There's 3 buildings. They're each 2 stories in 2 stories in height facing Commerce, 3 stories facing the lake. There's 4 units in each building. We do intentionally use the word flats because there are not individual townhome units that have multiple stories. Each floor will have 2 units, and then they will be accessed by a staircase and internal elevator. There is a proposed boardwalk and shared HOA dock arrangement with the adjacent property, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move through. But that is something that actually is not under the purview of the city in terms of permitting. That's something that's under the permitting authority of a number of other agencies, DNR, Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, Lake Minnetonka Conservation District. So we just want to note that because that is something that's going to come up a few different times this evening. The properties are located on the eastern side of Commerce Boulevard between Auditors Road and Bartlett Boulevard. It is next to Lost Lake. You can see there are 2 different addresses. The applicant is proposing to combine them into a 7.9 acre site. However, most of the site is actually in wetland, and so not actually above the ordinary high water level, and so it's actually not buildable. I did a zoom in just so you could see the existing conditions. There is an accessory garage on the 2400 parcel, which is the northern parcel, and then the 2420 is vacant currently. This was a historic property, historic, maybe that's not the right word. This property previously did have a home and a garage. Right now the garage is the only thing remaining on the site. The applicants are requesting a major subdivision and preliminary plat. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but the plat just combines them into a single lot, and I'll explain a little bit more about what they're looking for in the future. And then the conditional use permit is the tool here in the city for a shoreland plan unit development. The shoreland plan unit development is needed for a couple of reasons. One, it is a shoreland development, and as we have experienced in other places, the density doesn't really match the density that is technically allowed from the Shoreline Overlay District, which is very common, particularly in our mixed-use areas. The conditional use permit or the plan unit development is also required anytime there's a new development in the mixed-use corridor district, so no matter what, we would have had to have gone through this process. The area is guided mixed use in the comprehensive plan. We just have one mixed use district, just to remind everybody. Through our amendment, we just created one mixed use district. The goals of the mixed use districts is to support commercial, public, and residential uses, particularly townhomes and row houses. And it's really still meant to provide flexibility because we do have unique properties. And this was another example of those. It's not very deep. It's kind of an odd shape. It has access to the wetland as well as to the channel in Lost Lake. And so it just provides a little bit more flexibility. The density goal is between 8 and 15 units an acre. While the whole development is larger, if we calculate it to just what's above the ordinary high water level, we're only looking at a 1.3 acre site, and they are proposing 12 units, which is 9.2 units per acre, which falls within the guided density for this area. Relative to zoning, it is mixed-use corridor. It is in the Shoreline Overlay District, and again, new development as planned needs a plan unit development. So just back to the overview, I kind of referenced this, but it's a little easier to see with these visuals. They are proposing 4 units per building. Each of the units will either have 2 or 3 bedrooms. There is also a 12 by 12 accessory building on the north end of the site, and I can point that out when we look at a site plan. You can see the front perspective from Commerce Boulevard, and then what the lake perspective it will be, and I'm going to walk through different elements as we work through the presentation. Particularly, I just wanted to note parking, because this is a nice time to kind of explain it. It's a little bit different than normal. There is going to be private below-grade parkings with the drive aisles. So this is a side elevation, and you can see a side entrance into the parking area. You will notice on the right-hand diagram that they will have this drive aisle, and then they will have individual parking stalls that can fit 2 vehicles in each, and then a storage area behind. So the drive aisles, particularly for that middle building, will be something you would drive through. So the middle building, you would drive underneath and through it to reach the north building. Not quite the same in the south building, but you'd still need to keep that drive aisle open so that folks can access the other parts of the garage. So back to the request, I just want to do a little bit of overview on the preliminary plat. The plat is going to combine, as I said, 2 of the existing parcels together into a single lot. The applicant is going to pursue what's called a common interest community plat, so a CIC plat, and that was what will create the individual dwelling units that can be sold. So we do have another example in Mound Marketplace, that's a CIC plat. That is something that can be created, but we are having this plat so we can establish the underlying lot, and then the CIC plat will happen. That is not something that you, as the Planning Commission, review, but something that the city will be knowing that will be coming. And then the applicant just needs to have drainage and utility easements along the perimeter of the property just to make sure that there is the needed access. Relative to the plat, that's really all that we're doing. I don't have a lot of other comments. Most of my comments this evening will be on the conditional use permit. Again, it is required to support the development that they are seeking, as well as this requirement of the mixed use district. So as we kind of walk through the different elements, when we look at site plan and the setbacks, The table kind of summarizes the different requirements of the mixed-use corridor district. Technically, the mixed-use corridor talks about having the building facing the right-of-way line, so the front yard setback, 15 to 25 feet is required. You can see it really varies from 6.9 to 39.9. Part of that has to do with the shape of this lot and the dimensions and kind of how they need to provide access to the building. So that affected what is possible. So that requirement through the PUD, we will be varying it. The side yard setback is established by the PUD, though a 10-foot side setback is pretty typical for what we have here in Mound. So in the north and south buildings, that's what we're noting. We don't really have one for the middle building. And then the shoreline setback is supposed to be 50 feet. They are providing, as you can see, the minimum that there is 25 feet. As we've noted, there really is not a lot of depth for this lot. This is something that has been under discussion with all the different agencies and bodies, just how tight it's going to be. And so the request through the plan unit development would be to vary from the 50-foot to the 25-foot. They have stayed out of the shore impact zone primarily. And they have stayed out of the 25-foot dimension with the buildings, but they aren't really able to do more and make everything work that they're proposing. Unit size is kind of just the diagrams of the different colors, just to illustrate the fact that on one side on this floor will be one unit, so the red, the green will be another unit, and the blue is the common area. So a staircase and an elevator. And that's one of the reasons why this design was chosen, that it really makes a lot more flexibility rather than a traditional townhome that has stairs, and if you needed elevators, you need to have one for every unit, and how you access the garage. And so this arrangement they felt like would work better for the market, and you can have more conversations with them. So this is a product that is going to be unique to Mound. We don't really have exactly this product someplace else, but they were trying to address the challenge of what folks were looking for on one level living, having to have different ways of people accessing the garage, and so there's all of those reasons for this design. But again, the applicant can provide more information on the market and why this design was chosen if you are interested. We do have architectural design requirements in the mixed-use corridor district. Looking through those, it felt like this product did meet those, particularly with the different and changing in building materials, the variation. The only thing that really kind of stood out as potentially something that could be addressed is there is a requirement that has the pedestrian entrance areas to be covered so that you aren't standing there trying to get into the building. I think that there's a chance that part of the design is doing that, but it's not really illustrated very easily on these diagrams, so that's something I thought we could ask the applicant about. Because it looks to me like, as I looked at the different elevations combined with the building floor plans, that it is likely, but something we want to check on, because that is something that we talked about as being important for really enhancing the pedestrian access to sites. Building height-wise, they are meeting the 35-foot requirements. Just a reminder that we calculate it as the average between the elevation on the Commerce side, the lake side. We do the average elevation, and then we go to the midpoint. So obviously the building will be taller facing Lost Lake, shorter facing Commerce, but on an average, they'll be under the 35-foot. And the dimensions are in there. They're pretty close, but that's something that we had talked about, and they are working on keeping it under 35 feet. Also, the regulatory flood protection elevation is 933. All of the buildings are well above that, so that isn't of concern for this project. As most of you know, for Shoreline Overlay District, the requirement is that you need to look, when you do a plan unit development, you have to look at tiering and figure out how much the density should be within each tier. A tier is generally 200 feet. Because of the depth of this project, the entire project is within the first tier. The maximum number of units that can be, that is allowed is 5 units. That takes the lot area that's above the ordinary high water level, divides it by 10,000 square feet, because that's our minimum size for an R1 lot. It yields 5. They are proposing 12. Hopefully that seems familiar to many of you that have been here. That is a very common issue that we have, where the density being proposed doesn't match, especially in our mixed-use districts where we're trying to do more than single-family homes. So the 5 to 12, the PUD can accommodate for that. We have to acknowledge the fact that we are above that, but they are trying to do steps that they can to address that. I did note in the packet the open space. The open space that is required is 50% of the open space and 70% of the shore impact zone area. The applicant has given us calculations that say that they're above that. That's the one area that I was realizing as I was getting here, that I felt the most uncomfortable just because I hadn't been able to figure out all those calculations. So they are saying they're meeting it. It's just, it's an odd site. And so that may be something that we want to clarify. The biggest thing for staff is we want to make sure we have the right numbers and that they don't change. The PUD can accommodate, and we certainly have looked at higher open spaces in other projects that we've done. So it's more a matter of getting the numbers right, I think. If we feel like the project is appropriate, given the density, given that it's downtown, the mixed-use corridor. I just didn't have a chance to call today. That's what happens when you lose a day, is you realize that the day got lost. So I apologize that I don't have that number for you. That is the calculation that they provided, and it probably is accurate. It feels like a number we should be verifying and understanding better. So, parking. Driveway access is from Commerce Boulevard. The nice thing is that there is only one driveway access, and that's something that is preferred since it is a county road. The units will have private 2-car garages that I already talked about, and you'll have to drive through the middle building to get to the north building. Visitor parking is available on Commerce Boulevard only. There are no visitor parking. I know that the original initial concepts had some visitor parking, but it was tight to figure out how to do that because everything needed to be above the regulatory flood protection elevation. We needed to be out of the shore impact zone, so it was hard to make the configuration work. So that may be an area for further discussion. But as of right now, all the visitor parking is on Commerce. In the packet, it specifically reminded all of us kind of what the rules are about parking on Commerce. The other thing, there is a note on the site plans to talk about snow removal, and it basically says kind of put it on the site and then truck it off. But if you look on the site, there's not a lot of room for it to be, so further discussion may benefit on those. Those are probably two of the areas that staff is kind of recognizing that are very tight with this project. But it is a project and something we've been looking for. So those are kind of the balances when you do a plan unit development. Landscaping plan-wise, they're proposing 12 deciduous trees as well as native seeding and sodding ground cover. The landscape architect for our firm reviewed this. She's done a number of the reviews for us. For Mound. So she just had some comments and questions. We put those as conditions. One of them particularly has to do with slopes and how we're going to actually maintain certain landscaping. So that's a conversation that we want to have. Again, we want to make sure that this is looking nice, and I'm sure they do. But we're looking at it in the long term in terms of how are we going to maintain this at that high level if it's hard to reach certain parts in certain areas. That's something that can be addressed and worked out with us, so we just have that as a comment to work out with staff to kind of figure out how landscaping is going to work for the site. One element that is kind of hard to see is there is the grade difference between Commerce and the units, and so they do have, it's probably best on this one, a number of ways, kind of ramps and staircases that kind of are things that have to be addressed because all of that access needs to be taken care of on their site, and they can't be in the right-of-way for Hennepin County to do that. So that's also impacting kind of the landscaping and the flow and retaining walls, and that's all impacting how the landscaping comes together. So that's something that we're aware of and we'll need to work with them on. Wetlands today, I received the notice of decision that just confirms kind of the information about the wetlands. That's something that's separate and issued by the city as the responsible governmental unit. There is one wetland. It is the Lost Lake part of this project, or what we call Lost Lake, and that is off-site and it continues. So it's bigger than just this site. So we do have the wetland that we need to be aware of, and it is cataloged as a public water wetland. They will need to meet the requirements of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District relative to wetland buffers. So just for perspective on everybody, they had to address our 50-foot shoreland setback, as well as our 20-foot shore impact zone, as well as the wetland buffers that Minnehaha Creek Watershed District needed, as well as 2 different elevations in terms of regulatory flood protection. So they had a lot of layers that we were working on. And so they have tried to address all of our different regulatory concerns. And Minnehaha Creek will be dealing with theirs separately, but it did impact what could happen on the site and how things came together. So this diagram, the blue line is the wetland delineation line. And so this just kind of reinforces all of the different impacts. I believe the red is where the shore 50-foot setback would be, which is why this really isn't usable if we don't allow some flexibility towards that number. Stormwater, they are proposing 45.3% impervious surface coverage. The district actually allows higher percentage, so that is in keeping with the district. The Minnehaha Creek Watershed District is really the one that will review the stormwater management plan, and the applicant will need to meet their requirements, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in one moment. So with that, I'm going to move on to staff consultant agency utility review. This was distributed, as is our customary practice, to all of the agencies, staff, and consultants. The DNR is probably the one that we received the most recently, so I wanted to address that. They actually have two separate comments letters, as we noted in the packet. One was the request that they actually completed density tiering analysis that I walked through. They hadn't completed that initially, and provide the open space preservation numbers. That information obviously has been provided. The second letter we received last Friday, and that was one that really focused on a point at which they weren't ready to positively respond to the dock and boardwalk that I had talked about initially. So just as a reminder, kind of a boardwalk up to a dock that connected to the dock that was already here in place. As I referenced early on in the presentation, Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, Lake Minnetonka Conservation District, and the DNR are all of the regulatory agencies for the boardwalk and the dock. So while we're mentioning it, we're going to acknowledge it. It's really not something that we're hoping that we'll spend a lot of time reviewing this evening, because it isn't under our purview. We don't have regulations about it ourselves. We will be having meetings with the DNR and trying to address and understand where they're coming from and where all the agencies are. So we want to address it, but it isn't something that we can fully address this evening. I do note that the letter said that they were comfortable if we move forward with the subdivision and land use elements, even with that issue. So that was a nice nod to us moving forward in our process. The city engineer did review and provide comments. These are more technical comments in nature. They really don't significantly impact the change, or they didn't have a concern. So we just wanted to note that they had those comments, and those would be added as conditions for any approvals moving forward. The fire department also reviewed. They generally were positive about the fire suppression or the sprinklers that would be installed. They did note the fact that parking on Commerce is a little bit challenging relative to fire. However, it's not a violation. We could move forward. It's just something they noted that would be a little bit more challenging because of the parking situation. Hennepin County Transportation, I alluded to this before, but just to kind of go full circle, they had reviewed this and made comments. One of the biggest issues is that the stairs and retaining walls could not be on the public right-of-way. They needed to be on the individual property. The applicant received those comments, and in a matter of a couple of days or a day, turned everything around with an updated site plan, which is the one you're reviewing. That has been sent to Hennepin County, but they're still working on their review and comments on that. They also noted that stormwater drainage patterns shouldn't be altered with county approval, which is a typical response that we would receive. And they had another technical comment about driveway sloping. So we expect to have more comments from Hennepin County Transportation subsequent to this meeting, but generally those were their concerns. It more had to do with what was on their property, and they didn't preclude moving forward if that's something the city would like. They would just like to continue to work with the applicant on revisions. And then the final three agencies, Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, again, has been involved with a lot of meetings along the way as these plans have been developed. Our understanding from the applicant is that they have preliminary support, and that this month MCWD will be looking more specifically. As you are aware, typically MCWD likes to have us do some of our work before they do their full work, and so that sequencing is kind of typical. But the applicant will need to meet whatever requirements they set forth. Lake Minnetonka Conservation District, they are the ones that are involved with the docks in particular, and they are aware of the application. They've been at the table with the conversations, but they need to have specific applications received, and they also are concerned that the other agencies do their work before they do their work, so they obviously will be part of the conversation. And then MCES doesn't have anything in the area, so we don't need to worry about them. Public comment-wise, we did distribute, as is our customary practice. No comments were received in preparation for the packet or for tonight. So we are still holding a public hearing this evening, so we do ask that the next step after I answer any questions and we have the applicant kind of provide any comments or clarifications, since it is a highly technical application, there may be things that they can improve upon from what I said. That you hold the public hearing, and then as you are aware, there's kind of 3 different ways this can go. If you need additional information, we can certainly have some time to do that. Otherwise, recommend an approval or denial. Staff felt like this generally is following what the city's vision is for this area, and it feels like it's in good shape. Obviously, there are conditions recommended, and there may be more conditions necessary based on our conversation this evening. But our recommendation is that this should move forward as long as we maybe add the conditions that improve the project and make it the best it can be for the site. With that, I can answer questions, clarifications.
Questions for Rita?
Can you go back to that illustration that showed the 50-foot, we're showing it in red, that one?
Yeah, I hope I have that right.
So
It's hard to see right now. Yes.
are the buildings in front of all that red, or are the buildings overlapping all that red? Can
These
you
are the
blow
buildings.
that up a little?
Yeah.
Oh, so they're taking up over half of the 50% setback?
Yes, I am right? Because I can't see the writing anymore. Yes, thanks, Anna. Okay, that's the shoreline setback.
So the stuff that's in white is
Okay,
outside.
all of a sudden I got worried that I did this and I had it wrong. So, thank you. So this is your 50-foot shoreline setback. But note that this is the front of the site. So without allowing some or any infringement, there wouldn't be anything happening on the property.
So they're asking for what,
25 feet,
25 feet?
yes. So the buildings are all right along the 25-foot. I mean, there's obviously, but I think this is the closest point if I remember correctly.
Thank you.
The small area of the building that's 6 feet versus the required 15 feet area?
Yes. I think
is-
that's right in here where this property goes at an angle. Do you see this?
Yeah. But is there anything about that 6 feet that compromises the intent of the 15 feet? Is there any harm in that?
So we're the ones that set that up, the 15 to 25. That was generally set up to give a range so that we would see, especially townhouses, to be closer to the street, to have that more pedestrian connection feel. The only danger of being closer is if there wasn't space for a sidewalk, which we already have in this property. There's already a sidewalk along Commerce. And so that's why we want some type of setback. The setback also allows a little bit of space for folks to be outside. But given this site's location, my suspicion would be that most of the residents are going to be focused on the lake side versus on the Commerce side. So it probably isn't as big of an issue that it might be in other areas where we do want them closer because people might be out the front kind of doing and having that issue.
So those setbacks were front setbacks that we were considering, not the rear setbacks with respect to the wetland.
The 15 to 25 foot one is the front.
I see.
And we had set that up just so that the buildings, the biggest thing was so that we didn't end up with buildings with parking in front of them, so that you ended up with Commerce, parking lots, and then a building, and the buildings get set way back, because that really doesn't work with the feel that's along that or that the city's going for.
Could you, I'm not super familiar with the tiering unit analysis you mentioned. Could you compare and contrast that with the comp plans unit guidance for the zone, for the district?
Yes, I can explain it a little better. I did a high level, so I apologize. Hopefully I can explain it better. Let's see, do I have a, I was just gonna see if I can zoom in a little bit, because it might help us.
And I was also in particular not knowing if I was tracking what is the density with respect to just the buildable portion or the entire lot and how that works with this tiering. That was.
Okay,
that was
yes, so the comprehensive plan, we're gonna do that separately. That one is looking at the total site, but really the only part that's above the ordinary high water level, how many units fit on basically the upland or the buildable. And that's how we got the 9 units per acre.
Got it.
Shoreline tiering suitability is a different look and measurement. So what it looks at is it divides up an area from the ordinary high water level, and it says in this case, 200 feet back, and then another 200 feet back. This is how many units you can have in each one of those. We don't have tiers 2, 3, and 4. In some projects, we have had that.
Okay.
And so what they're trying to do is push the density back away from the lake shore and put density. So you actually get in those cases, if you have multiple tiers, you actually get a bonus if you won't do anything in the first tier and you push those units back to the second tier or back to the third tier. You'll kind of gain units that you can build.
I see.
In any city, they use the foundational size of your single family
Okay.
to talk about how many units you can have in that tier. So in our case, it's 10,000 square feet. Even though we have R2 with 6,000, we have to use 10,000 because that's our R1. From a lakeshore preservation perspective, they want the fewest number of units on the lake that they can have, which makes sense. And so that's why we use that. So what we do is we take the land in the first 200 feet. How much land is there that's not wetland, that's not, those kinds of things,
Which is essentially all the buildable area.
in this case.
Okay, yes.
And then we divide that by 10,000 square feet.
Okay.
And that's how you figure out how many units you are allowed to have in that tier.
And then that would have given us 5?
That would have given us 5.
And we have the power to raise that to what
Yes, the way that shoreland rules work is if you have an approved shoreland ordinance with the DNR, you have the ability to vary from that through a process, through this kind of a process to have a variation. Now, there is always the ability for them to sue you because they think that you're not applying it correctly and you're not doing it correctly. But this method has been the method the city has been using when we're talking about our downtown area, because otherwise we aren't able to do what's reasonable density in the downtown area. So we've always gone through the exercise and said, but this is downtown, and it makes sense that we would put more density downtown, and so we'll have more that would be allowed. In addition, because we are talking multifamily, we're not talking just single-family homes. It's a little bit different than if you were doing single-family lots. Because you're building multiple units on the same, you're kind of being more efficient with the land than you would have been had you actually built the same number of units. So if you'd done 12, you would have taken up a lot more land than we're taking up for this. Did that help?
So it sounds like we are within range for the comp plan
Yes.
for the unit density, and it sounds like we are probably above with respect to the shoreline tiering, but that might be a bit more for sites where you have multiple tiers, potentially more applicable.
Yeah, for us, if we didn't do this variation, we wouldn't have any of the projects, like Artesa,
Yeah.
Harrison Bay,
That makes sense.
Village of Autumn. I mean, none of them, just because of the way that the density works.
Great.
So when we move into things that are not single family, then we usually have issues with the shoreline tiering.
Further questions for Rita?
I have
For-
one
go ahead.
question. The snow removal comment, it looks like there's really not a lot of call for snow removal here. Is there something I'm not seeing?
Just the driveway, and then the little part in between the building.
Okay.
So the one in between the building, probably, there's room. The driveway only made me a little bit nervous because there's the boardwalk entrance here, and this is a staircase that's aside it, so I'm sure they'll figure it out. It's just, whether or not it's enough to say, put it someplace and then cart it off when there's too much, given the slopes. It's just a conversation that's good to have and clarification.
And you mentioned the fire department looked at it, no issues with rescue vehicles getting access or anything like that.
Because, yes, they said that it would, how it is proposed, they would be comfortable with. One of the advantages is the fact that there is the fire suppression being proposed,
Okay.
so that reduces the concern that you otherwise might have.
Okay, thank you.
Speaking of snow, is Commerce Boulevard a snow emergency route?
That is a very good question that I might be able to
And if
answer.
so, there wouldn't be any parking allowed on Commerce during certain hours of the night.
I think that's on that parking, which I didn't put in the slides, but I will check. I can check the snow emergency while others are talking to you, because I can just drive along the road, see if there's a sign. So I don't know the answer off the
If
top
I'm a
of my.
visitor to this
Yes,
facility
yep,
and it's in the middle of winter,
You can't overnight.
I'm not going to have a legal place to park if that's the case.
especially overnight.
Correct.
Yes, sir,
Thank you.
yes.
Okay, further questions for Rita? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. I'll take all my stuff with me.
You don't think so? Okay, is the applicant present? Would you like to make some comments, sir? Sure. Please come forward, give us your name and address.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Gooley. I live at 5496 Lost Lake Lane, right here in Mound. I, in fact, walked here tonight, which is
Nice.
what we love to do.
Just a few blocks.
We've been working, as Rita's explained, this is very complex, and we've tried to work as partners with every agency and certainly with the city. We've been working on this diligently for nearly a year.
Wow.
And so we want to make sure that we are addressing everything we can possibly do. One thing I'd like to just address is the reason why the parking is under the building. When we originally came up with a plan for this, the parking was going to be behind the buildings with a driveway coming down. Well, we quickly learned through all the agencies that's not going to happen. You saw some of the slides. So we had to come up with a creative way. Our architect was able to come up with a method to allow us to park under the building and still provide that parking. So we totally understand, the concern there. We've been, we're squeezed into this very narrow lot, and we're doing everything we can to try to address that. So I just wanted to sort of answer that. The family that we're buying this from, Russell and Betty Fallness, you may be familiar with that name, have been working with us for, like I said, the past year. Russell recently passed away on the 29th of June. Betty recently reminded me that it was really his dream, if you will, his goal to see this developed into what we're doing. So she wanted me to know that just as a point of reference. So we feel, honored, I guess, to be able to try to carry that thought forward. So really, we all live here. This is a great community. We all know that. The walkability, shopping, churches, restaurants, whatever. This is a very intentionally placed development, not only just because of the lake and the views, but the walkability is there's really only 3 communities on the lake where you can do that. We're one, and it's really an important aspect to what we want here for the future buyers. So anyway, having said all that, we are here to answer questions. We have a representative from our civil team, architectural team, the co-developer Carl Runk, who's got extensive experience in condominium development. We'll try to answer any questions you have. We do agree with the staff report, and we support the approval with the conditions, and we'll work to make sure that, we've got 3 other agencies that we're dealing with too. So you can imagine the process here is somewhat daunting, but we appreciate your input, and we want this to be an asset. I mean, I live here. We want this to be an asset in the community and really, hopefully, spur further development along Commerce. So the 2040 plan is really something that is adopted and can be carried out, because without the flexibility, there's a lot of limitation to what could be done in the future on certainly this side of Commerce. So I'm open for any questions, or we can get our professional consultants up here if you need to.
Okay, questions for Jim?
All right. So I guess 2 questions. One is,
The first one was the snow removal.
Yes.
How are you guys planning on doing that?
Okay, so.
We'll start right there.
Well, first. So it would probably need to be removed. They would probably bring in a Bobcat. I live at Lost Lake. We deal with this constantly. There's not enough room for snow storage, really, especially in the bigger snows. It's a removal process. It's part of the HOA. They build in that price for snowfalls, let's say over 10 inches. So it would be done by a local group that would be close by. Beanick does our Lost Lake, and, you know, a company like his or similar would come in with likely a Bobcat and remove the snow into trucks and remove it that way. Otherwise, there is probably, you know, for a 2-inch snowfall, there's probably some ability to store at that point. But it would be part of the HOA fee.
So, second question is the parking.
Yeah.
So it's not a snow emergency, but the city doesn't let you park there November 15th, April 15th at night. So what do you do?
Is that, okay, I didn't see that, if that's, we were just working with the 4 PM to 6 PM and 7 AM to 9 AM and open on the weekends, 24 hours.
So I
If
think
there's
in the
a-
winter, all city
Oh.
streets from November 15th
Okay.
till April, you can't park from like 2 AM to 6 AM or something like
Okay.
that. I think it's all city
Yeah.
streets.
Okay, and that's fine. I mean, in this case, we're not heavily relying on visitor parking for this. We imagine some of these buyers are going to not be living here in the winter. That's a possibility. We are working with, I'll just say, some other landowners in the vicinity on an acquisition that might help that down the road, but it's been a long process and too early to tell whether that might be a possibility.
That was going
But
to be my suggestion, but I'm guessing you already approached it.
we're been like a year. As long as I've been working on this, I've been working on that. I think you guys know.
Know what we're
Yep.
doing.
We're going to add that as a condition.
Yeah.
It's all the visitor parking.
You know, I think it's just a really great-looking project, and it's going to fit in beautifully there. I do, you know, and my feeling is, you kind of answered a little bit that you're expecting snowbirds to maybe buy, but unless you're marketing to people with no friends and no family, I do have a real concern with, there's 0 on-site parking.
Yeah.
I see that as a real negative for something of this size, this packed in.
Right.
And you're packing a lot in. I also have these are only my 2 criticisms, other than I think it's a great looking concept. The 2 buildings that are closest to the shoe building that I think you're
The shoe- yes.
considering, those feel really crammed into me, too tight. I feel like there needs to be more visual.
Being the space between the 2
Yeah,
buildings?
like that space feels appropriate. The other 2 feel really slammed in together.
Part of that, and maybe I could have
Yeah,
Tim
I
address
know,
that, but
I'm
the
just saying,
curve in
there's
the
no
road
visual.
is somewhat dictating that angle too. So it's a little difficult to create that same separation with the road as it is. I don't know if you want to address that here when you.
I
but,
bring that
yeah.
up only in that I love that you're trying to preserve some architectural perspective that we can still see over the roofs, and you're not going to go over 35 feet.
Right.
And then this part feels really natural to me, and then you get down to the other 2 buildings, and I understand your constraints. But that, to me, feels really shut off to any kind of view to give us some relief from the
View
architecture.
from Commerce?
Yeah.
You mean?
Just architectural.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Relief.
Well, Tim may be able to address that because I will probably not be the best person to answer that.
Well, let me ask you this. If you do end up going forward with possibly going with the property next to this, would that change any of, God bless you, would that change any of how you're going to space these buildings out, or would you be adding another building to that? I'm just trying to think forward so we don't end up running into issues that we could have maybe solved.
Yeah, it's difficult to answer that because it's a 50-foot lot. There's limitations. Again, I wish I could say that, you know, we already had this under contract and, you know, it would be moving forward. I don't at this point. So I can't say for sure what would happen because we had to make the decision to come in based on what we knew. So would it be better? Yes. Would we? I don't know exactly what we would do there. I think we'd have to really look at it and try to determine what would be possible there. Could you potentially straighten out some of those concerns you have? I would think so, but we'd have to really put more time into it to analyze that. We just don't have that worked out yet.
You haven't closed the deal yet. You
No.
gotta keep
Well,
working,
if you all
right?
can help me do that, I'd appreciate it.
Is there any thoughts, why are we doing 4 units per building? Is this just a financial consideration to make it, you know, feasible, financially feasible?
I think so. I mean, I think it just naturally worked out that way to have two, you know, these flats work one above the other. To limit it to 3 or what, it just, it doesn't really work from a construction standpoint. You can build the shell and then it's constructed for the space for the 4 units. I mean, if you look at it, you know, a little bit what Rita was talking about, I mean, this is really 3 houses, 3 large houses. Even though they're 12 units, the square footage is really almost, I mean, this may not be a solid argument, but almost under the density requirement or limitations, because instead of 5, this really, if they were large homes, would be 3 large homes. We're just putting additional units inside that same sort of footprint. So it's just another way to look at it. I'm not saying you have to.
So each building is how many square feet in each individual building?
Just curious.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
A specific question is what?
The square footage of the building, 15,000 for each building?
Well, I say each, so it's 2,000 square feet average for each unit, so we'd have 4,000 and maybe 500 in between, so that's 4,500, so 9,000, something like that on the 2 floors.
Well, so each
Okay,
unit's
that
2,000?
has to be
Okay. Yeah. So it's 2,000. That's pretty good.
Rita, did we have a question about public entrance?
Yes, I just had a question about whether there was coverings over the entrances. Kind of looked like, based on maybe there might be. I wasn't architect.
Yeah, you could probably address it. There's a recess and then a,
Okay.
oh, no, go ahead if you want to.
Oh, no,
Did the question make sense?
yeah, so the amount.
Sir, I'll need your name and address, please. It's our protocol.
Yeah, I'm Tim Witten, Witten Associates, Architects, Minnetonka, and specifically the question is,
Your name and your address.
my 4159 Heatherton Place, Minnetonka. Tim
Thank you.
Witten, yeah.
The question is, how, when you enter the buildings, is there an awning or something that you're standing underneath?
Yes, there would be a projection over the doors. in
Over
each
the
case.
threshold?
Yeah, so you've got a door in the center that gives common access to all the units, and then the 2 units on the main floor have a private entrance off of from their unit out to the sidewalk. So we actually have 3 doors per building. Part of the concept is that, in reviewing your 2040 comp plan and some of the images and references that, we're looking for more of a townhome look, and that's really what we're setting up to do in the design of the elevation. But they would have a cover over each of the front doors.
Do each buildings in that front door area, is that where mail would be distributed, or is that in a separate location?
I say it again, I'm sorry.
The mail, does each building have mail collection
Oh, yeah,
in there?
so if there's a building floor plan, maybe you can kind of show it.
Just a second.
I know that was one of the questions that Hennepin County asked for clarification on, had to do with deliveries, and just making sure that deliveries aren't blocking the county road.
Yeah,
I don't
so-
know, this is the,
Yeah.
this is kind of that area.
So, right, in that area, just right at, from the front door in, and as you can see the elevator, that space right there in front of it that's for mail.
Okay.
And parcel packages, which is pretty common these days, so.
It's kind of nice, too, that it's in that area with each building, so you'd only have 4 residents getting deliveries in each building.
Yeah, so this is, guest access mainly for that front entrance. That's why we have handicap accessibility ramps leading up to those. And then you get access to each of the units, and they have direct access down to the garage.
So let me,
Exterior material board, I just want to pass along. Shows we're using high-quality stucco and also hardy cement poured panels, and in kind of a soft white and charcoal combination with high-level architectural shingles as well. So it kind of, it fits the architectural style of, kind of transitional Tudor, modern Tudor kind of a look that ties that together.
this question is more for, I'm sorry. Done?
I'm done.
Rita, is there a requirement for some kind of public space, barbecue areas, a public area?
There is not for townhouses, it's for multifamily apartments. But, even though I said that, it doesn't really show on here. I didn't point it out, but if we move down here, each one has this outdoor space. This is outdoor space, this is a terrace seating area, and each one of them has this, each
Okay.
unit.
So
It's not a public, it's not a joint gathering space.
It's a private or
But each
individual?
one has this private, but our code is specific on that topic just to multifamily, not to townhouses.
Multi-family, not for townhouses.
Can you clarify
Let me think about that.
when they're pulling into park, how do they access parking? I can't tell here, is it from the
You mean-
lakeside or when they pull into that shared
Just one
driveway?
second.
That's what I'm asking.
This one. Oh, do you want to see on the site plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There you go. I'm going to rub all that off. This is interior.
Yeah. That'll be very nice. Thank you.
Can we see that? So it comes off here. This is the driveway. And you come in and you go in an entrance that's at the lower level underneath.
On the side?
On the side, and that's,
Okay.
if I can go back to, if this makes sense, to you, I'll go back to a different diagram, but before I did that, I wanted you to see. So you drive through this, then you drive through this, and then you get into
All the
this.
snow off my car dumps right in that, right there before it gets.
And then on this side, you come in and you go in this way. So I'm gonna go back, but I wanted you to see that first.
So the residents of the north one are driving through the parking lot of the middle one?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's why there's actual, it shows kind of like a garage door here, so that it's a door that's movable. But you come in, you can see better on this side elevation. You come in this way, and then this is the drive aisle where the door is, and then these are each of the,
Yeah, it seems a little unusual, but I get with the constraints. I can see why that probably made the most sense.
Rita, did I understand you to say there's a garage door for each individual stall up there?
well, yeah, we had talked about it, I think that's still there, right? That's what it looks like.
Yes.
That way,
Which would
you don't
make
have
sense
to
if you're
worry
driving
about,
through.
Yeah.
like, the north building's driving through
Yeah.
your building, it adds a layer of protection.
So
There's
is there
security.
also a garage door at the entrance to each building?
I
No,
assumed.
not on the sides.
Okay.
So if you picture, it's just like townhome parking, individual garages, each has a garage door. It's just that the private drive that you access to it is covered.
Okay.
It just has a roof over it. Otherwise, it's open to the weather, and so no garage doors on the end.
So on the lake level, if, on the lake level, you've got the 2 floors, and then underneath it, you've got, right now, 4 boxes. what are those? Are those, obviously it's part of the parking ramp? Yeah, what are those?
Those are just openings that we have, so it's open in a sense, but it gives protection from the view from Lost Lake. So it's really, looks like it's a finished space instead of just an open, if we put columns there, you'd see all the garage doors. It's just a way to cover up.
Is it like a false window or something?
We have actually windows on the two ends. So they are, even though they're windows to cold space, it's just to give that look.
Rita, just circling back to the question about the shared public space, can you walk me through what makes this a townhome and not a multifamily
You took my
development
question.
specifically?
You stole my question.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm not following it.
Is it unit density? Is it something else that makes this a townhome? And
It's kind of not any of the things that we have in our code.
right, it seems like that.
Right? I mean, if it's an apartment, we've mostly looked at apartments being more of the single hallway,
Okay.
kind of walkway with more than 4 units is more like a quad building as opposed to an apartment. I mean, to some degree, that's part of what you're here to do, is to confirm, yep, that makes sense, but that's why we didn't apply that shared space, because of the fact that it's not acting like an apartment, the big apartment, like an Artesa or any of the
Yeah.
other ones. It's more acting like individual units in a building.
And we didn't do shared space requirements with the villages on the island, right? Because I don't think they have any shared spaces, which would be,
Correct.
in my
They
opinion,
might
be-
have it, but I don't think we required it.
might be the most comparable that I can think of.
I don't think they have like shared space in the,
They don't have like a
but
shared
they have
sitting
something
area.
along that back.
Yeah, it's a slope with some rocks. I mean, I think
that's what
dogs can
like
go
over
back
there, and
there.
then they had like a little area by that
Yeah.
handicap unit, but we didn't have
Yeah,
that requirement.
it's nothing that's, I think, built out to be a communal space. But that's the only thing that I can think of that might be similar to this, where
Yeah.
where we didn't require a community area.
Correct.
So it sounds like it falls in a gray area, and either
Totally.
seem reasonable. Okay.
It falls in a gray area because it looks like a townhouse.
Yeah.
But it is a flat,
Yeah.
but it is for sale.
Yeah.
It's not really rental. It's not really the big stuff that you all said that you didn't want in the vision.
Yes.
If we qualify it, if it was an apartment, then we've said that apartments aren't allowed.
And to be clear, it sounds fine to me.
Yeah,
Just was curious what the thinking was.
yep.
And you won't be exceeding 35 feet from the roof to the, anybody?
There's nobody
You
there.
won't be exceeding 35 feet from the top of the roof to the street level?
It's,
I understand
It's not
lake
how it's
level.
measured.
What's that?
it's not how building height is measured though. Building height is the
Well, I'm a
average-
visual person, so help me out.
Okay, it's the average grade between the street level and the lake level. So if the street is here and the lake is here, the average grade is here of where we're starting.
Okay.
That's our starting point on the ground, right here.
Yep.
And then we go to the midpoint of the roof, not to the peak of the roof, we go to the midpoint of the roof.
Oh,
And that's how we measure everything. Single family home. Everything that has the lake and has the peaked roof.
so the
So the
actual height.
roof will be higher from the lakeside. If you measure from the ground. and
No,
the
I'm just
lake.
talking from street side. I understand
Oh,
lake
street
side.
side. It will be,
Less than 30 feet,
it will be less
That's what I
because it's
need to
gonna
know,
be
yeah.
higher upward starts.
because it's 2 stories plus the roof,
Okay.
so it'll be less than
I
30
actually
feet.
have those, I can look it up.
Well, you don't have to. I just want to make sure from the street,
Yes,
that's the area that I imagine we're losing a lot of visual
Yeah.
open space. So I just want to make sure it doesn't
Yeah.
exceed 35 from the
From
street.
Commerce Boulevard, from the street to the sidewalk, the full height will not exceed 35 feet.
Okay, thank you.
No.
And Rita, walk me through the process here. If we were to approve this, what's the next step? Is there another time that it would come back to the commission?
if you recommend to approve, then it would go to the city council and you
That's it.
wouldn't see it again. Unless they made an amendment or, but generally, you wouldn't see it again.
Okay,
I have a
thank you.
question, and I'm not sure which applicant to direct it to, but could we discuss the boardwalk for a moment? I just wanted to know what the vision for that was.
ask a question?
Yeah.
Carl, can I-
We need your name and
It was
address.
just the fact that you said which applicant, because they're all.
The whole team here. So I'm
It's a
Carl.
team, but they're not-
Carl
Yes.
Brunk. Address is 441 Second Street, Excelsior. So I'm co-developer with Jim Gooley on this. So our proposed boardwalk is, like she said, is involving other agencies. And so our goal is really taking upon what's so successful at Lost Lake Villas, which has been there for 20 years. There's a high demand for those homes because they're HOA maintained and because there's lake access and walkability to downtown Mound. So our vision was to have a boardwalk that extends out to the neighboring open water that exists today with the neighboring property owned by Mark Kozakowski. We have an arrangement with to expand and enhance his dock area to add additional boat slips per LMCD rules. Because there's 900 feet of shoreline of this site that we have under contract with the Fallis family. And so that allows, every 50 feet, a new boat slip per LMCD rules. So we're looking at a new design that we take forward to the LMCD, to their board, within the next 30 to 45 days for that. So that's the design intent for the boardwalk. And we speak about amenities, that is really an amenity, if it's approved, that binds the owners in this HOA, we think together, is that while there's not a common club room in the three buildings, we think the lifestyle of having access to that boardwalk and going out to your boat slip in the nice months of the year is an amenity that'll bind people together as far as this community. Really, again, taking upon what works so well at Lost Lake Villas today.
And that's connected with the other residences there, but not to the I guess the city boardwalk or the city gathering space, right? It's dead-ended there.
It's with our current design intent, if you had that site plan, Rita, it dead ends at the open water that's there today. I know that the city has a larger vision. It sounds like it's someday to have the public boardwalk connect all the way to Surfside Restaurant. But at this point, we don't have rights to that. We have rights to the Fallis site and then connecting with the neighboring property.
Is this the one you were missing?
Yes, yes. So the proposed boardwalk design extends out to where there's open water today. So we're not applying for a dredging application with the DNR. So like Jim said, we've spent a year in meetings with other agencies in this, and this is the best design idea we could come up with as far as, taking advantage of open water that's there already and working together with the neighboring property owner on that to enhance what's there at his site and provide an amenity for the residents of this project.
Okay, thank you.
Well, as I was reading through the notes, and I understand we don't know if the DNR is going to approve this or not, but how does that impact your potential sales if that isn't one of the perks that you can offer?
It definitely has an impact,
Yeah.
a major impact to this project. So we made that clear to everyone at the city we've talked to. We know it's not the jurisdiction of the city, that we're working closely with the LMCD and the DNR and the Watershed District on this.
And when do you expect to have final information?
In the next 30 to 45 days. We're finishing our proposed dock design right now with the company, and we have an application for a multiple dock license with the LMCD that we're advancing as our next step.
And, I'm just being the devil's advocate here, but if they say, we're willing to do this, but you can only have 10 docks or whatever, that's not going to derail this project?
Well, no, we're going to take it one step at a time with them, and the expectation is that the LMCD's already told us as a staff that the rule stands here. We're buying 900 feet of shoreline, one dock per 50 feet is the rule. So that's the allowance. We have only so much open water with the neighboring property to design these
Right.
slips. So there's a capacity limit that we're designing. So we have a design that's going to be advancing as an applicant very soon at the LMCD, which will keep the city up to date on that process. But our early conversations, we've had a number with the LMCD. They're very supportive of our proposed design intent on this.
Great.
And the DNR does not have, our understanding does not have jurisdiction because we're not asking to dredge any of the existing cattails. We're just looking at leaving it all as is on the Fallis property and installing a boardwalk over to the existing open water.
Thanks.
Okay, do we have other questions for any of these gentlemen? Okay, hearing none. I'd now like to open the public hearing to consider planning case 24-13. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the planning commission regarding this proposal? Let the record show that no one came forward. Therefore, I'd like to close the public hearing and now go to further discussion and review amongst the commission. Thoughts about this proposal, ladies and gentlemen?
Snow removal obviously is an issue. Parking is an issue.
I would think that we would want to add resolution of visitor parking to the conditions.
Can I check in on that? So the
Yes, sir.
the Lost Lake properties on the other side, do they have external parking? Do they not? Or
On the other side of, like the east side of Lost Lake?
yeah,
They have external parking.
they do. Okay, all right. Okay.
And I think they have little driveways too.
Okay.
That's what I was just
They
going to
have a
say.
tiny driveway.
Because they have driveways, that gives you the perception that, you know, a visitor could park in your driveway, which we don't have here. That's why it's a little bit concerning.
I think it looks great. I'm
Yeah.
not as concerned with there's the one picture of the elevation view from the street of all three buildings. I don't think it looks too jammed between those top north two buildings. I guess my concern is pretty much solely parking, and if they can resolve the issue with the property to the north, my recommendation would be to use that all for visitor parking, and then I wouldn't have any concerns with it.
Exactly.
I think they've used, it looks great. I like the way they are hiding the garages from Lost Lake. That looks nice. The boardwalk idea is great. You know, eventually we can, as a city, continue that boardwalk down to, like they said, the Surfside. My only concern is parking.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about parking, but honestly, it's not a huge concern for me. I think I know this is gonna sound maybe not the most appealing, but there is a parking ramp not too far. So if it's during the day, your guests can go to the parking ramp. I live on the island. When I have events, sometimes people have to walk 2 or 3 blocks to get to my house. And they do it because they want to come over. So I mean, this idea that we get away from walkability over design, I'm not as concerned about the parking. I feel like there's public parking in the ramp. Now, I don't know if you can park in that ramp overnight, but during the day, you certainly could if you had to.
I think you can.
People do.
People do. Whether you can or can't, people do. But,
On the-
I mean,
on the other- on the
it's a
other hand-
walkability area that we're
On
trying to
the other
build
hand,
up.
if I'm 85 years old and it's
Right.
15 degrees below zero, do I want to walk from that ramp down to this complex? That would be my thought.
But I don't think we can predict who's going to be living in there either. I know there's a target that they're shooting for, but we can't guarantee that that's going to who ends up buying.
Because this is a multifamily, wasn't there a requirement that a certain amount of parking spots per unit? And the other one we looked at?
The townhouse, not a
Townhouse,
multifamily.
Yeah, so, but,
Where are we on that, Rita?
yeah, I thought there was a minimum,
I'm getting it.
On the Finch Lane one.
yeah, the Finch Lane, we had to have,
Finch Lane.
it's pretty much the same thing as this, isn't it? Finch Lane one, we had to have 2 parking spots per number of people or something, if I remember correctly. I can't remember. Maybe I'm beating a dead horse here, but,
No,
Was that the commercial
No, I mean, I
property?
think it's
Well,
a
if we're
pretty
looking for
mess.
consistency,
yeah, I want consistency. I mean,
you know.
Next to the post.
She's looking it up now, I think.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
okay, that one.
I mean, the boardwalk looks nice, I like that. I mean, aesthetically, it looks pleasing.
I think one thing that will likely happen is if people need to park, they'll go to OLL. And so I
Across the
was
street?
going to ask Rita when she's done searching, but I think OLL was on the notification window that that she showed on the map.
So the other thing I'll say, I don't know if it's directly proportional to the parking, but I am super happy with the number of units we're getting on this space. It's more than I would have expected. And just from a growing the housing stock in our community, having more families on the lake. I mean, this is, to me, I'm very happy with the amount of families we'll be able to get into this plat.
You just can't have 3 drivers.
And all I'm
Right.
saying is that I've lived in apartments with no dedicated parking, and if you
Right.
want it, you make it work.
I see the
Much less
parking as more of a marketing
2,000
issue than,
Yeah.
I don't know that, I visit people downtown and you figure it out.
Yeah.
And I do have a question when you're looking at that too, because when we did that,
My computer jammed, so just a second.
when we did the building on Langdon, there's property that the city owns in that parking lot. So there's actually 20 stalls of public parking in that behind, like the
Yeah,
Tonka
like the
vacuum. and-
chiropractor and the closet store.
Back where they wanted to build
This
that.
is all city parking back here, technically.
That's where they'll go.
This is private, this is city.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll come to that.
Yeah. And there's gonna be parking over here by Auditors, the old
Well-
Auditors Road.
I mean, increased property values is always nice.
And so are we deciding on the condition? We're waiting.
I think we're waiting for
We're waiting
Rita
for
to
his computer.
tell us whether there's a,
IT stuff.
whether there's a public parking requirement.
Anything else to ask? HOA, dock.
No, I think with this one, the parking is
Yeah,
probably
snow removal.
the biggest challenge.
Well, I'm not sure we solved that issue.
I
Maybe
know.
it's between city and the developer.
Yeah. I think we should put it in there.
That would be my suggestion.
I will
should put the
mention that
findings back.
when these people made the proposal at the city council, for just letting us know that they were coming here, there were 2 spots dedicated to people parking or emergency vehicles or what have you, and it's gone. It was right here. In that furthest building, it was right here.
What happened to it?
I don't know, I was concerned about it then, but now it's gone completely.
Well, we have some gentlemen in the crowd
I
who
know.
might be able to address
Yeah.
that.
Do you want to talk about why you got rid of those 2 spots?
Please.
Thank you.
And we'll need your name and address, sir.
My name's Matt Pavick. Address is 224 Oakwood Road, Hopkins. I am with Civil Site Group, civil engineer on the project. So we worked on the site layouts. We had the original sketch plan with the 2 guest spaces. As we continued to refine the design, we were really concerned about the steepness of that driveway, particularly with people coming in and making that turn at the bottom. So we wanted to kind of flatten that out as much as possible. And just the dimensions with where we had some switchback ramping to get into the front, we weren't able to fit parking spaces there. So what we did do is we relocated a temporary, we call it a loading zone, that's down below. So a single delivery truck or a guest could park there for a limited time, which we thought functioned well to kind of serve the purpose of a lot of that temporary or guest parking concern. We also had the street parking, and then I think a really good point, the parking ramp up the street. Just Google, it's a 6-minute walk from there to this site. So,
The temporary loading area that you mentioned, is that on the north side of the south building?
yes.
Is that what I'm seeing striped there on the plat? Okay.
Yes.
2 units.
It's right in here.
Yeah.
Okay, Rita, did you
So
find out
parking.
anything for us?
Parking, well, I applied the townhouse or row house, which is 2 spaces per dwelling unit,
That's what I thought.
which is why
They have it.
they have that.
They have
Yeah.
the 2 in their garages.
It's not about, that's, generally, yes, we do like to have visitor parking. We generally recommend it, even if they do provide 2 spaces per dwelling unit, we will still comment on that. But technically, it's meeting the code.
Okay. Further questions or discussion regarding the proposal?
All I'll say is I heard some maybe discussion around hoping that they might be able to do something with an adjacent property. My preference would be that we respond to what they propose and not what they could have. So if we want to enforce a parking condition, it should work with what they have now and not what they could get.
Well, my thought would be that this really is an issue that needs to be worked out between the developer and the city. And
At the very least, if you could just add those 2 spots back in, even though I didn't think it was enough then, 2 weeks ago, but now I'd be comfortable seeing those back in.
your point's well taken there. Thank you. Okay, further discussion or questions?
Can those even happen with the way the driveway has to go into the elevation? I think that was part of our problem.
Correct. There was a
I think
grade.
they need to hear that, because that.
Yep, there was a
that's
grade
just-
challenge with the slope, so the parking stalls would be very sloped to the side if they were 90 degree off that parking, or off that entrance drive.
And we have a requirement that they have to be at a certain elevation,
Yes.
right? And so getting them at the right elevation all the way, like the drive,
Correct.
is a problem.
Correct. So it's just not physically possible to keep them, so.
Yeah.
Would there be an opportunity for shared parking with some of your neighbors?
We would definitely address that with neighboring properties, not probably residential, but potentially the church, the Masonic Lodge, whatever. I mean, there are options that we can address between now and council. We didn't realize it was going to be as big of an issue, so we would have sort of addressed that in advance if we had expected that. So I think it's something we would look at for sure.
It was kind of an issue even at the city council meeting, though.
Yeah, no, it was, and I guess we were thinking and didn't realize that the winter parking restrictions were in place. So we were going with, what the code was and what we thought was ample street parking for most of the day and all 24 hours on the weekend. We did not know about the restrictions during the winter, so you're right, it is something that we will definitely look at.
Thank you. Okay, further questions or comments? Hearing none. We have 2 proposals from staff. Both are that the commission recommend to the council approval of planning case 24-13. The first recommendation regards the conditional use permit. There are 12 conditions and 6 findings of fact. The second recommendation addresses the preliminary plat, and that is with 10 conditions and 3 findings of fact.
So I'm going to make a motion really quick on the, I don't know if we do need to do this separately, but.
I think we ought to do them separately.
The preliminary plat seems pretty straightforward. So I'll make a motion to approve planning case 2413, the preliminary, major subdivision preliminary plat with conditions 1 through 10 on page 22 and findings of fact 1 through 3.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
What is number, concurrent approval, conditional use permit? We're talking the first one or second one?
No, this is the
We're just
second
going
one.
through the plat. It's
He-
a
he-
the plat.
He went to the second one.
Because that's straightforward.
Concurrent approval. So it has to be approved. Okay, it has to be approved at the same time. Okay.
Okay, you heard a motion and a second. Further discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, let's go back up to the conditional use permit. Jason, do you have comments on this?
So with the conditional use permit, I don't know what you can put in a condition for making sure the city and the developer work out the parking arrangement.
I think you just said it.
You know, I share everybody's concern with parking. I don't know that I see it as a basis for me to make a decision on this. If they don't have ample guest parking, that's an issue for them and their tenants and desirability of the buildings of their units they're putting up. I don't see it as a public safety issue or anything that would lead me to vote no when I otherwise think it's fine, except for the parking.
I agree with you, and that's why I'm saying having a condition in there to make sure that the city and the developer work that out. I'm not sure what type of legality that even covers, because they could just say that we're not going to put it because we don't think they need visitor
Yeah,
parking.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Mr. Baker, Mr. Good, I mean, you can handle it however you want, but you can make a motion and then do a direction to staff and the applicant after you make the motion or before. That, like, motion, direct staff and the applicant to work in advance of the council meeting to work on improving the parking availability. And we can talk about what they did and what was possible for the council. If you don't want to make it a condition that something has to be figured out, because we don't really know what those options
We could have a condition that there should be further discussion between the developer and the city regarding parking. Leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, I'm comfortable with that.
Then I will make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for 2413 with the 12 conditions documented on page 21, plus an additional 13 that the developer and city work on finding additional opportunities, if possible, for parking. And then also the 6 findings of fact. How's that?
Second.
We have a second and a motion.
Could we clarify visitor parking?
I'm sorry. Yeah, visitor parking.
Okay, we have a second and, motion and a second. Further discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay?
Okay, motion carries. Could you,
Yeah, the reason being, I'm not comfortable with not having a concrete answer on the parking yet. I think that's going to leave an open, an ambiguity that I'm not comfortable with.
Okay.
Happens going to the council saying, oh, we worked on it, doesn't resolve anything. Oh, we talked about it, that doesn't mean much. What are you going to do? What's the concrete steps you're going to take to resolve it? Because I don't want to have cars parked on the street and tickets during snow. So I think that's part of our job, is to figure that out, or give recommendations.
I agree.
So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well put. Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
Moving on.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for coming.
A reminder from our meeting 2 weeks ago, we have a couple of you that are up for term expirations. And so you're requested to reach out to me. Yeah. Yeah, if you have interest in seeking reappointment by the members of the council. And you can do that by email.
Who is up?
Yeah.
Do you know who's up?
I know
It's in our minutes.
Oh, okay, I'll check it out.
You're up.
Mr. Good,
Are you ready?
really? I can go grab the packet. I didn't grab that note. There. Just give her a sec. Give me a sec. Mr. Good, Mr. Heel, and Nick Rosner. Your terms expire at the end of the year. So if you have interest in seeking reappointment, just if you could send me an email sooner than later would be great, because we'll have to post and seek applicants, as well as get interviews scheduled at an upcoming meeting. Typically, that is at our November meeting.
Okay, further questions about that? All right. Kath, anything from the council?
No, I mean, it's hard to imagine. I don't have anything to say, but I think the next meeting, there will be a lot, because we have a lot in the cooker with budgets and some other things. But I will just mention that speaking of OLL, the Incredible Festival is next weekend. So that's always a fun event. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah?
I don't have anything new, just busy as always.
Do we know when I'm going to get a table over at that new restaurant in Commerce?
Never.
I don't have
Exactly.
I don't have any new information from what I shared 2 weeks ago, is that they're working under the existing permits. They're still doing some switching over some space, so that they can get their final Met Council SAC determination, evaluation for the new restaurant and the patio area, so that they can get the last permits issued. So that's what I know. That's about 3 weeks old.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
We have a question. Are we going to
yes,
go
ma'am.
into, so our next meeting is October.
October.
Are we going to revisit or give any thought to changing of the start time for this meeting?
Good idea, good.
We could put that on the agenda.
put that
if
on the
you want.
agenda.
I know
I
we
think
wanted to wait a while to see
That's-
how it was going with
Yeah.
council.
Yep, we can sure do that.
I just didn't know if we were far enough out to consider
Yeah,
it
because the
again.
council started
In May.
In May.
And it's gone just great. We haven't had any
Yep.
complaints. Most of our meetings have been actually pretty crowded. So it might be an advantage for people just buzzing home from work or whatever to show up. And once you get home and kick your feet up, sometimes they don't want to come back out.
Same here.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we put that on the agenda and then everybody
idea.
cogitate about that between now and then? Our next meeting is October 1, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to bring up? Hearing none, Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you for coming.